This is the Making Noise podcast.
I don't even know if this entirely relates, but like the feeling of having an entire audience like have a shared or like a shared collective I don't know, emotion or feeling towards what you're doing. And like to be a little bit more specific, besides like throwing keys to say like, hey man, like on a ballad where everyone has their lighter out.
Right.
You know, like how beautiful is that?
Oh, absolutely, man. Like to me as a performer, that's why I do it.
Yeah.
That's why I do it, you know. I want that from the audience. I want to see that audience reaction. I want to know that they're having a moment and feeling something, you know. Megan and I have been in a duo for the past almost 4 years, and one of my favorite moments that she and I have ever had when we were performing, we were doing a concert. This is last April 2019, and we were doing this piece by Mara Gibson, and there's just this phenomenally delicate, intimate moment where Megan and I are both making sounds at the edge of audibility, and we take a breath and we come in on the exact same pitch. And when we did it, we were so in tune with each other, just like breath together. We were so in tune that for a moment, I didn't think my note was coming out of my instrument. And then so I crescendoed an imperceptible amount, and I felt the resistance of my horn. I was like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, okay, I'm playing. And then in the texture of the piece, like I have to descend in quarter tones away from her and then lock into something, and that she matches that tone. And we did that. And so when we made it to the end of that phrase, I was just thinking to myself, well, damn, we just nailed that. That was really beautiful. That was exactly how I would want that moment to go. And I had my eyes closed and I opened them, and they just happened to fall on this couple sitting a few rows back from the stage. And his eyes were just wide.
Oh my God.
And he turns and looks at his significant other, and he just mouths and I watch him do this. He mouths, "What the fuck?" And I was just like, yeah. That's exactly why you do it. Like, that is the new music equivalent of, you know,
The lighter,
the crowd full of lighters,
yeah.
Right? That was the new music TM equivalent, right? If you're creating this gorgeous, intimate moment and you get an audience member to mouth, "What the fuck?" I was just like, that's it. I'm going to put my horn away. I was like, this recital's over. It's done.
Job's done.
Job's done.
Oh my God.
I'm out of here. I'm donezo. Let's go.
It's amazing that you caught that too.
I can honestly say, like, in, you know, hundreds, maybe thousands of performances I've given in the past, like, you know, 25 years plus of my life, that was a moment. That was a moment I replay in my brain. Anytime I'm having a shitty, like, practice day, I'll connect with that and be like, okay, well, there was that. You did that. Don't give up. Keep searching, keep reaching, keep wanting to improve, keep striving for that moment.
Yes, you know, and there's that discomfort you were talking about.
Discomfort, man, right? Like, if you get comfortable with how you sound, all right, well, you know, you got to be uncomfortable. You got to be uncomfortable. You have to want that bit of discomfort, you know, and it doesn't, you know, another thing too, though, is that I think we also equate discomfort or struggle with suffering, and those are not the same thing. You know, I want discomfort, but I don't want to suffer. And I think sometimes that's another bad thing in classical music we do too, right? Is that we're like, well, if I'm not suffering, I'm not making art.
It's
so stupid, but you know, it's so easy to buy into.
Yeah.
It's so easy to buy into because so much of our culture, both inside of classical music and outside of classical music, talking about classical music, wants us to buy into that, right? Wants us to buy into this myth of practicing 10 hours a day, or, you know, this kind of black swan mentality. I mean, I know that film's about ballet, but let's be real, it could just as easily be about classical music.
Totally,
this idea of beating yourself into extinction and then you achieve perfection in art. I really liked Aronofsky as a filmmaker, but also kind of fuck him for that movie because it's a really shallow depiction of what it means to create and what it takes to create. You know, I'm a much bigger believer in what David Lynch said, that suffering gets in the way of creativity. If you're suffering and you're a creative, you are being creative in spite of that suffering, not because of it. You know, Jimi Hendrix wasn't a legend on guitar because he was addicted to drugs. He was a legend on guitar despite the fact he was addicted
exactly, yeah.
Charlie Parker was a legend on saxophone, not because of heroin, but in spite of it. Right?
I love what you're saying right now, because it's so accurate, it's so true. One thought I have as to the whole ideal of like the starving, suffering artist is it's a romanticized depiction, and which is why it actually, I would argue that it works well for a movie, is because it's romanticized, you know. So it's like,
sure is,
you know, so like it draws you in and you're like, oh my God, the emotional power behind that, you know. And but that, like you said, that's part of the problem, is like, especially when we're young students, which I'm sure you probably experience as a professor. Your students are like, oh, but I couldn't do that, or like, I don't have that pain, you know, I'm not cutting my ear off, like.
Right, yeah, exactly. I saw both of my ears. How could I possibly be a great painter? Like, well, there were plenty of great painters who had both of their ears. Go forth.
One could argue that the majority of great painters had both ears.
I'm pretty sure statistically that is true, right? Yeah, it's just, but you're right. It's the stories about the painters with one ear that sell movies, that sell books, that capture the public imagination, right? Another one of my least favorite classical music tropes that happens in culture is classical music is something that sociopaths and psychopaths and villains listen to. That's one of my least favorite. And I don't know where it began, but I think I have yet to see a more compelling case before this. I think it starts with Silence of the Lambs.
Ooh, I could see that.
With Hannibal Lecter being a highly cultured, playing the aria from the Goldberg Variations serial killer, right? Yeah. And because I think ever since that movie, what was that, 89? I think 89, 90?
Yeah.
That's been a huge, like, trope in media, right? So much so, like, I've been going back and rewatching the Marvel Netflix series, right? And sure enough, well, we need a way to show that Wilson Fisk is the bad guy in Daredevil. So guess what? He's listening to classical
Mozart.
music. Yeah. It's like, and then, you know, multiple series later, we're going to introduce Sigourney Weaver's character in The Defenders, and she's the biggest bad of them all.
Right.
Guess what? She's a classical music lover and supporter. And I'm like, okay, it's just become this incredible shorthand for people who are deranged psychopaths. You know, and I think that comes from decades of classical music denying the body. You know, right? Classical music as a culture for decades has erected that barrier between artist and audience member. And so now I think culturally it's become shorthand for somebody who easily throws up an emotional barrier between themselves and a large group of people.